everybody wants to really know about something that's interesting, and residential happens to be that space. We've heard a lot of people talking in the previous panels about employee experience and hybrid and all of that. So the function of residential has fundamentally changed. And when that function has changed, it's important that we change the way that we buy it, lease it, and implement it. So with that in mind, I'm going to direct my first question to Vivek. Vivek, one of the things that we've realized is in the past, brokerage used to be about someone finding you space, someone doing your contract, someone doing your maintenance, so on and so forth. But now you've sort of brought it all together under one platform. Tell me, where did you get the idea about that and how did you implement it?
Thanks, Arshish. So let me go back to our evolution and like 7 years back when we started. So we looked at this entire value chain of residential real estate, and we identified that primary real estate brokerage is the biggest piece of the pie. So we went after it. So in our 7 8 years of existence, first 5 years we were just doing primary real estate brokerage. We were consolidating our position there. We are now the largest player for primary real estate in India. And as we learned that market over the years, we found that a lot of our customers were coming back to us for mortgages, like people who have bought homes through us. They were coming back to get a home loan. A lot of these people wanted to rent out their houses. They wanted to get the interiors done. They wanted to get their properties management. So we found out that the customer is the same, and during his life cycle he is actually going through various phases. Sometimes he is in the search and discovery phase, sometimes he's in the ground research phase, sometimes he wants to rent out, sometimes he wants to do interior. So we realized that we this is the right opportunity for us to venture into these all these other areas, and we started slowly getting into these alternate spaces. Started with mortgages, and now we are probably the third largest. I think we are the third largest player in mortgages in India now. We started interiors. We started property management. We acquired a few companies where we didn't have in-house capabilities, and that's where this whole thing came up with. Now, uh, so we want to be the one-stop shop for everything real estate. So during a customer's journey, whatever needs that he has related to real estate, we want to be the company fulfilling that.
It's fantastic. You mentioned coming back with relation to the lease agreement and various other products in the whole service line. So I'm actually going to go to Ms. Gupta now. And you're an expert in legal due diligence. Can you tell us what are the 3 to 5 top things that clients are looking at when they're doing due diligence on a property, whether it's for lease or sale, and how these platforms, your peers, Square Yards, No Broker, and Raja's platform PropStack is actually enabling that entire process?
Thanks, Ashish. Yeah. So the basic 5 things that people really are looking at is that the property has a clear title, that they have an occupancy certificate, that there is no litigation or pending dispute in relation to the property, that all taxes, etc., are fully paid, and finally, that they're able to, the location, the locality, and all of that is also in an area where they are comfortable. So what has happened is because of COVID, people have really were not able to go and do physical inspection and all of this. So they were looking at houses for leasing as well as for purchase and all by going to the various platforms, checking out, which were done very well. And only when in certain occasions where they had the opportunity, when they were buying last minute just to check that everything is in order, they would actually go and inspect. Otherwise, they were just going ahead and completing the transactions. More so because also during COVID period, the real estate was not doing very badly. So certain governments like Government of Maharashtra had given stamp duty incentive benefits, as a result of which a lot of people decided that, to pick up properties and buy them. And most of them did feel, and also with RERA coming in force and projects getting registered, and certain government sites also, giving basic information on registrations and all, things did become easier and a lot of property transactions did take place.
It's fantastic. I'm so glad that you mentioned COVID because it sort of leads us into a segue into the next question. Akhil, you've spoken a lot about how tech can disrupt, and of course, we know that it can create a paradigm shift. But can you talk about the fact that disruption was necessary when COVID took place, and how tech actually enabled us to continue as if nothing was going on and return to some form of normalcy?
Yeah, thank you. So basically, if you see in real estate, a disruption was long pending. If you see the way real estate industry has grown, typically it has been a individual driven kind of a business where there is a broker or there is an intermediary or advisor who helps you close the transaction. All the businesses before no broker, after no broker, they have enabled the brokers into the system. And when you bring in the physical person into the system, what happens is that you take the deal away from the platform, and for that particular fact, we started No Broker saying that it will be a technology first platform where whatever happens, it happens with the technology. And the benefit of that particular thing during the COVID was because we have never had a, human first kind of a approach, no feet on the street kind of a approach. We were able to adapt extremely fast to COVID. And so when COVID was there, people obviously didn't move out. They didn't need house, but there were people who were looking for new houses either to buy, and buying of the houses, as Ashu was also mentioning, that because of the cuts in the duty from the government, and otherwise when people were sitting on the cash, suddenly they started realizing that they need bigger house, because if they have to work from house, with wife working, kids school happening from house, they will need a bigger house. We were able to enable all of it using virtual tools. So what we did, we built a tech around where you can very well see the house on the videos, correct? Because we have all the transactions in last 8 years which have been consummated onto the platform. We have the realistic price discovery which was happening onto the platform. So we were able to tell our customers, okay, this is the right price at which if you're getting a house, this deal should be closed, or this is the right rent at which this should be closed. And because of the technology first approach, what happened was all the extensions to the need in the real estate cycle of a customer, that comes very natural to the platform like No Broker, where you not only get your house, you do the virtual tour, even the property due diligence that started happening online. If you're renting the house, you get rental agreement. So it's a fully automated process where you can get the rental agreement sitting at the home, and all the services after that starts from packers and movers, cleaning, interiors, and everything happens on the platform.
Thank you. That's fantastic. And we'll come back to how you've actually promoted No Broker in just a second. Pushkar, just wanted to check, has the first poll been released? I think we'll come back to Pushkar on that. But Raja, I wanted to direct the next question to you. You've chosen a very different business model as opposed to transactions, brokerage, and actually selling the product. You've chosen to monetize the data. And we've been hearing for the last 20 years, data is the new oil, data is the new oil. But having seen your platform, I can actually confirm that. To create a platform that gives you access to all publicly available information is one thing, but to create a platform that gives you insights in order to be able to make a decision is something else. So can you tell us a little bit more about how PropStack was founded and the problem that it was trying to solve?
So, Arshish, thanks to CII and Colliers for organizing this and having me in the first place. But I'll have to rewind a little bit to provide more context, because this is about the residential part. PropStack started as a tech platform providing data and analytics, right, in the commercial real estate space. Along the way, we created a lot of other products which are proprietary in nature, but we also expanded into other asset classes like warehousing, a couple of fintech products, and mostly B2B, right? But what we found most exciting is a B2C, the residential product. We're just trying to make information more transparent for our clients. And proactively, there was a lot of feedback that was coming from them where they were talking about how we could better assist them more than just the data, right, in their buying of their apartments itself. That was on one side. And on the other side, we had our developer clients telling us as to why don't you provide us leads? Because they knew customers were looking at our data. And when they were looking at the data, that means they were interested in purchasing something, right? So, and that's when we realized there was something more to this than what we were seeing. So we went slightly deeper into it, right? And we realized that there was a huge resale market, which was not necessarily getting addressed, and it was full of friction, right? And right from price discovery and the basic process itself of the transaction getting consummated, I mean, it was extremely inefficient. And that's where Zapkey came into being, right? I mean, Zapkey is a platform which gives you data-backed, curated, and verified resale homes with a guaranteed sale, right? That's the proposition. And what's important to note is 60% of the sale that happens in most metros are resale instead of primary sale, right? Even when you do a primary sale, more often than not, when you're graduating from a smaller to a larger apartment, you are actually selling your existing apartment and then moving to a larger apartment. And that really entails a lot of things, right? Again, figuring out the value of the apartment, figuring out defects in the apartment, creating virtual tours during the COVID times. And finally, removing the uncertainty about the sale of the apartment itself. I think, that's what we'll be providing with the Zapkey platform. With our data, we are enabling the clients to value their apartment better and the buyer and seller to come together, matchmaking. And, with the guarantee that we're offering, we're just creating more liquidity on the platform.
A lot of sense. And I think when you talk about creating more liquidity on the platform, that's essentially what buyers want. Because any market that creates liquidity kills uncertainty. And that's what we're really trying to solve, especially in these times. But I know that it's been a long journey getting there for Indians to trust buying something like this online. So, Akhil, if I could go back to you, the ads that we're seeing continuously about No Broker have got a lot of work and thought process going into them. How did you decide to create something, a campaign that essentially introduced the concept of buying things online through No Broker to the Indian public?
See, it's not us who have done it. If you see, there has been a natural progression towards the digital world, correct? If you go back to 2013 when we started, Flipkart was already becoming big, correct? People started buying stuff. Flipkart started by giving cash on deliveries, and eventually they started collecting payment online. We were the first one to launch the app for the discovery, basically for the real estate thing. What we have done is we have taken the value proposition, which is we feel that customers are pained by low quality of the service at the atrociously high cost which is being charged for finding or selling the house to them. And that is what we have bet upon. And that's how we created the C2C marketplace where we say, you come out, you are a owner, you come out, we will ensure that you just get the genuine leads coming to you. There will be only genuine tenants or genuine buyers who will be looking for, who will be interacting with you. There won't be any brokers. And when there are two genuine parties who are trying to consummate a deal, it eventually happens. And that is what we have seen in last 7-8 years since we have launched.
Absolutely. Ms. Gupta, if I could go back to you, we know that the legal environment surrounding startups and creating these kind of novel ideas is often a little bit difficult to navigate. So what would your advice be for anyone who wants to be like Vivek, Akhil, and Raja? And what would you tell them in order to set up a company without any hassles, especially in this prop tech space? Ms. Gupta, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, like any other startup, there are a few key essentials that a person interested in setting up PropTech must keep in mind. One is they must have a contract between the promoters, wherein clear definition as to whose role, responsibility, contribution, profit sharing, etc. is put in place, so that there is no personal liability on the individuals. It's better, and also from funding perspective, it's better to either set up a private limited company or a limited liability partnership. Thereafter, what are the in the business that we are in, where we require certain registrations, licenses, we should ensure those licenses and registrations are in place. We should ensure, like for example, income tax, PAN number, GST registration, if we are going to intend to sell up any project, registration with RERA, if the project is of a large size, environmental approvals, licenses, all those should be in place. Now, those are the basic and key things. Then we should also ensure that because technology is moving faster than regulatory changes, we have to understand where the regulatory authorities or how the regulatory authorities are going to review things. So it's always better to be in touch with the relevant authorities and, run them past informally, so that at least we have a broad idea and perspective as to how they are going to review at a certain aspect. That's one aspect. Now, because data is the key thing in a technology company, origin of data, use of data has to be very carefully monitored, so that there is no data protection violation. There is, intellectual property safeguarded, confidentiality is maintained. These things are also cyber security. What happens, because we are all system based, if the system fails, cyber security is violated, what are the risk mitigants that we can take? So these are some of the key things that one must keep in mind. One must have someone in the team who is good in technology and has knowledge of information technology law, and also that a person is adequately safeguarded and has taken the right steps in that direction.
Thank you. I think that sort of sums up the process really well. What I'm going to actually talk about now is it is an experience to buying a home, but at the same point, it's also about how easy and convenient it is. So, Vivek, would you be able to tell us a little bit about what you've done? Of course, you've designed it with the customer in mind, but what are the specific steps that you took to make the experience seamless, to make it simple, especially, I don't want to say for Luddites, but for people who may not have been comfortable with tech 5 years ago?
Yeah. So Ashish, if you look at the consumer life cycle, again, I'm going back to that step. So there are probably 3 or 4 phases, and I'm talking about only buying or selling part, not the rentals. But so first is there is a search and discovery phase where a guy would actually is searching for a best location, what are the properties available in the market, so on and so forth. So that part has moved completely online, thanks to the platforms like Magic Breaks, Housing, and so on and so forth. The second part is when the customer goes and does a ground research, right? where he's looking at the location. He's actually visiting the apartment, the point which Akhil talked about. So that part is still offline. And I see that there is a huge scope of disruption over there where how can we actually make that part online or probably make some part of that value chain online. The third is about making the transaction itself, right? These are things like doing the payments, making the agreements, uh, taking a mortgage, right? So that part also, especially post-COVID, we are seeing that part is also moving online. And finally, there is a whole part of managing the property, renting it out and all. So in each of these segments, I see that there is a do it for me kind of customers and there is a do it yourself kind of customers, right? India, we believe that there is a small part of people who feel that they can do it themselves. But even if you go to more developed markets like US or Europe or parts of Japan, which are like very much digitized, uh, the value chain is still run by people who act as a conduit between buyer and seller, which are the agents. So we believe that there is a small percentage of people who would always be do it yourself, but larger part of the market in foregoing future in the foreseen future would be do it for me, and that's where we are focused on how do we enable this agent to do his job more productively, more efficiently, and how to make it earn more than what he's currently earning. So that's what we feel. And on the buyer side also, uh, uh, considering the complications involved, like what Ashu talked about, doing due diligence, what Raja spoke about, having a data transparency around real estate, right? So all of this, people would continue to need help, and we are focused on how do we enable this help through the conduit of an agent.
It's fantastic because I mean, when we talk about disruption, which is a very common word that goes with tech, and I think Daniel Susskind in A World Without Work mentioned this, that certain industries which are highly automable will be disrupted. It's important that you mention that agents and individuals will still be a part of the system so that it doesn't scare them into thinking you're competition. The whole platform gains as an overall process. I just wanted to ask you, Vivek, you mentioned part of the process being mostly offline, like the site visits and physically seeing the property. When do you think that will be digitized? Let's say 25, 27, and what are the tools that will help us do that?
Yeah, so I think that part is slowly being digitized, but I think the pace of technology has to catch up. The experience that the customer gets, right? So let's say if I want to do a virtual site visit of a location like, let's say, Gold Coast Road in Gurgaon, right? So of how much user friendly that experience is? I don't see any of the platforms evolving to that level. Maybe showing the interiors is fine, but buying a property is more than just looking at the interiors. So there are new technologies emerging, like there are technologies like making digital twins of the entire cities, right? So you have a physical city and you have a digital twin of the city or a building. So I think the technology has to reach that level, but that is a good area for disruptions. We have also acquired a company in this space and we are working very aggressively on this space. The second is while buying the property, I think property is still a very illiquid asset class, what Raja spoke about. So, how do we combine fintech and proptech and make property more liquid? How do we? There are platforms like Open Door, I think Raja's company is building something around that. How do we make it easier for people to sell properties? How do we make easier for people to get a mortgage? How do we make the entire property buying cycle uh, based on home equity so that you don't have to take the mortgage? So there will be so the second area of disruption would be how fintech and proptech combine together to make this journey easier and hassle free for the customer. So these are the two areas that I think are ripe for tech disruption. One is how do we enable a customer experience around ground research, and second is during the transaction or after the transaction, how do we make this asset class more inexpensive, illiquid, more liquid and convenient.
That's fantastic. And I think, Raja, the next question naturally just flows to you because Vivek also mentioned that this is your area of expertise. Tell us a little bit more about benchmarking the properties and the guarantee to be able to lease something out. How does that work? How does it create a business model that is unique and it's something that's been doing really well so far?
So, it all flows from our data, right, Ashish? What are the two major pain points for our clients right now? I mean, for any client for that matter, a home seller or a buyer is about valuing uh, the sale or the apartment, right? And our data provides them the comfort. With the data, you can literally create an automated valuation model. You can give them a value which is agreeable to both parties. That's number one. The other part is, about really guaranteeing the sale, right? So we've come out with a model where beyond a particular point in time, we guarantee the sale. The platform guarantees the sale. So what that means is your two main pain points are out of the window. I mean, it's coming together onto the platform. And the way we do it is, our data throws out a lot of insights, which means we know which particular locality, which particular project is doing well, what are the price points, and so on and so forth. So imagine if somebody within a very popular project wants to sell the project, we are able to identify the right price. We are able to, and then it's a very ops heavy kind of exercise, right? Our folks go there, they do a digital measurement, thermal imaging, figure out defects in the apartment, make it more transparent to the seller that it's going to be an additional money that the buyer has to pay, and tell the buyer that he's got to pay something additional than the value of the apartment. Then we create a 3D tour. We partnered with a company called Matterport, which creates a digital twin. You can even measure the apartment. And finally, it's about creating that curated experience where people are certain about the sale and they don't need to look back at the value that they're paying. Uh, so when we are able to create that part, and what happens at the end of it, we are able to create certainty because we know the value. So what we're telling the seller is, if we are unable to sell it within a given period, the platform will buy it from them, right? So we are pseudo buyers of the apartments. And the reason why we are able to take that call is, that's a very bold call, is because we know, based on our data, that at that price point, that project will sell sooner than later. So, that's how we are able to address those pain points and, create certainty and, match make better between the buyer and seller.
I think that's the word which you said is perfect. It's about matchmaking because there's today in this world, I think a lot of people, good buyers and sellers, are trying to find that balance and effectively try to find each other as, at the end of the day. Now, if we've started talking about the overall experience that customers have, how you sell it, how do you get the market into place. But I want to go back to all of you and ask, is there a disparity? Is there a disparity between your metros, your tier one cities versus other cities? And do you think that people in those cities will eventually reach the same level? So, Raja, I'd like to start with you on that in terms of buying properties online.
That's a very interesting question. And in our mind, our experience, we're just about starting out on, with our Zapkey platform. But from what we've learned over a period of time, in the commercial real estate space as well, there's certainly, I wouldn't call it as disparity. The market tends to behave very differently, right? The metros are more technology affluent. They're more online, whereas the tier 3 and tier 4 are more touch and feel and more offline, right? To that extent, and we've spoke about how you manage prop tech and fintech. I mean, that's the next level, right? If you call it 2.0 or 3.0, I think all of this will get introduced in the tier 1 and tier 2 cities, right, which we call as metros, before it actually goes to the 3 and 4. But I mean, if you look at it differently, is there a larger market in 3 and 4? I think there is. Those are, I mean, if you look at it differently, those are countries on its own, right? And maybe there are problems there which nobody's looking at, correct? So, I mean, that's really my response. Is there a disparity? Yeah, they behave differently, but is there a market waiting to get enabled? I don't want to use the word disruption. I think yes, digitally as well as otherwise. So all the models that's going to work in tier 1 and tier 2 will certainly work in the tier 3 or tier 4. You got to tweak it a little bit. I think that's how it'll pan out in my mind.
I think that's the best way of putting it. There is a huge market, and it's just about cost to serve. And eventually, it'll come to a point where you can do it economically, and then it's a great market to tap into. Vivek, I wanted to get your thoughts on that question as well.
I think Raja explained it very well. So we are not too much into tier 2, tier 3 markets as of yet. We are focused on tier 1 markets, but we see that evolving, and probably there is a 5-year lag or a 7-year lag, but these markets would also eventually reach there.
Fantastic. Pushkar, is it possible to pull up the results of the poll? I think we had asked one about which cities people expect to be seeing more traction in.
Right, it's on the screen, Arshish.
Okay. This is some fascinating findings. I think two things that really stand out for me. One is that everybody expects to see a lot more traction happening in Delhi NCR, so that's pretty clear. But at the same point, Mumbai, Pune, Hyderabad all got the same amount of votes, which is surprising, to be honest. I always thought it would be more in Mumbai. Perhaps I'm biased because I stay in that city, but it does tell me that there's traction across the board, at least in the metros. Do we have the answers to the next ones? Fantastic. This is equally interesting. I thought the majority of people would expect that more than 40% of Indians would buy their houses online, at least by 2025. But the fact is that a majority of the audience seem to think that it's in the 25 to 40% range, and I really respect that. It's sort of a central ground. It's matchmaking in that sense. Going to the next one. It just shows why we're having this session. Residential is going to get the most disrupted. There's the most technology to be able to disrupt it. So most of you seem to agree with that piece and perspective. And the last piece. This is really interesting, and I think it points towards something else. Most people would say that finding a home to lease is their biggest priority, but they also, in the past 5 years, have moved towards buying it online. Till many years ago, it was probably local brokers and different people playing a role in the system. But if I could ask this question of Akhil, why do you think people have become more comfortable buying online rather than engaging with a local broker or any type of broker, a physical person?
As per me, brokers will not go out of the system. Good brokers will be there. The problem with India has been that brokers are not regulated. There is no law for them, correct? Uh, every doodh wala is a broker, every akhbar wala is a broker, every pan wala is a broker. And they have been charging atrociously high money just for passing on the lead. Because if you see the broker, what it does, it will connect a owner, tenant, buyer, seller, and बाकी सब आप लोगों को अपने आप से करना है. And that is the single biggest thing which was ready for disruption, which we are trying to disrupt. Because what what a mind of a broker, and I'm not talking about any other broker, I'm talking about a top-notch South Bombay, extremely good broker who understands the market. Whatever happens in his mind or her mind, that can be automated using technology, using the data. Like the way PropStack has built a lot of data layers. There's a lot of data which can be used to guide, recommend, price discovery. There's a lot of digitization which is happening from the government side. Like if you see in Mumbai, whole of the registration process of rental agreements is online, and with the new rental bill coming into the place, every state will have to implement that particular thing. So things will eventually move online because of two things. One is cost saving, second is the time saving, and both the things are very, very important. If there is an individual who can work, give the top-notch service by either saving the time or the cost, they will still survive into the system. But people have become comfortable using apps, using technology in last 10 years. Even the elder people who are above 50 years, whom we thought, like my parents, my father, mother, whom we never thought that they'll be picking up the phones and they'll be using WhatsApp, or maybe they'll be watching videos onto the phone. They are very, very comfortable. So all that thing is leading towards digitization and moving real estate, prop tech online, which I feel by next 5 years you'll see a very big difference even to the poll results what you just now flashed on the screen.
I'm sure of that. And in fact, I'm going to close with everybody's predictions for the next 5 years. But before we go there, I'm just going to ask Raja. Raja, tell us about the power of platforms. As you said, you started off as commercial, then you eventually moved into the residential space, and now you've sort of brought data as well as transactions and guaranteeing it, sort of investment banking, if you will, to underwrite the sale of the property into it. So how is the power of platforms enabling the industry to grow?
So, we're talking about two different asset classes, right? The commercial real estate and residential real estate. They behave very differently. The audience is different. The ecosystem is different. One is more institutional. The other is more direct and consumerish, right? So when you talk about enabling transactions, it's because of the micro manner in which consumer transactions are conducted, it's easier to get into it as compared to the institutional manner in how commercial transactions are done, which is why while we started as a commercial real estate data and analytics player through a technology platform, we never ventured into the transaction space. But we felt at multiple levels, the residential sector had friction points which we could address with our data and with our model, right? So my sense is, I think this will only become more stronger. Again, polls say various things, but one doesn't even know the power of the data. We're talking about the data that we currently have now. We just spoke about the registration data, RERA data, so on and so forth. But imagine if somebody is able to integrate data sets like mobile data sets like credit card data. There's a lot of other data sets, and I can tell you, we are working with some of those data sets and trying to integrate. It gives you some very precise inputs to the extent you can predict who's going to buy the apartment, right? And that will be a game changer, right? Because when you are able to predict those kind of things, when you're able to create liquidity to an illiquid asset, and then there is that flow and the movement, right? That's when the momentum builds up, and that's when the system starts reacting. So, I'm not sure if that's the answer to your question, but I think more and more integration of data sets is just going to make life easier and create a more efficient prop tech ecosystem.
I think it is. That is the absolute answer that I was looking for. And we start off with something really simplistic, like a lot of offices are trying to co-locate where residential talent abounds. And obviously from employee convenience perspective, you want to be staying close to where your office is going to be. So data sense integration in that part really makes sense because you're not talking about creating something from scratch. It's the data sort of creating itself, as you mentioned. So that's fantastic. Ms. Gupta, if I had to ask you, what would your predictions for the PropTech space be over the next 5 years, or what would you like to see? What would you say?
So I believe that from a regulatory and legal perspective, there's a lot of work that needs. Even though the leave and license agreements are just now registered online, but what we've seen is that they're very standard. They do not really address all the issues. So data requires to be collated, even for diligences. In spite of the government actually providing searches online and all of that, there are various agencies that one needs to go to. So collation of data is very important, which I do believe will take time. Maintaining the registration records and all of that also may take time. Then we are not very familiar with blockchain and all that, which requirement, all that needs to be worked on. But I do see that if one focuses on it in the next 2 to 3 years, we will keep evolving and eventually we should be able to be there. But it may still take some time. Technology is moving much faster than legal and regulatory aspects.
Fantastic. Vivek, I would love to have your thoughts on this as well. One wacky prediction for 2027.
I would say, see, if you see how the world is moving from a asset ownership to a on-demand economy, right? So I would see housing. I would say housing would also become more like a on-demand thing. Maybe companies like big tech companies like Amazon or Google or like so on and so forth, they may become major housing player. They may buy housing and they may provide services at the click of the button, like the way they have disrupted other industries. So that's my big prediction, that housing may become from a product to service, and big tech would come into housing. May not be 2027, may be a few years down the line, but that's where we see it moving.
That's fantastic. I mean, we asked for a wacky prediction, and I think that's something we got to target. If housing could be like Uber, whenever you need it. That's amazing. I'm going to take about 2 or 3 minutes to quickly summarize what we've spoken about over here. Vivek, thank you for talking about your journey, how you started off as a pure play brokerage model, and then you realize that everybody needs the value-added services. And that's, I think, the power of platforms, because everybody knows that this is what we're really targeting. It's not just about find me space, it's find me someone who's going to give me all the answers right now. Ms. Gupta, you spoke about some of the questions that owners or occupiers of residential space are asking for: clear title, OC, no dispute, so on and so forth. We spoke about some of the incentives that the government had given in order to incentivize sales during this period. The fact that disruption in the industry was long pending is, in my opinion, a very, very clear fact. That's why your firms exist. That's why they're doing so well. And that is something that really changes depending on different cities. I know that there are definitely parts of the system like the site visits and physical parts that we need to have eventually move towards the online model, and we're definitely getting there. You spoke about the fact that everybody needs to play a role in the system. Good brokers will remain. It's not going to just eat away their jobs. Raja, you spoke about the fact that integrating data as well as the insights, the analytics, the benchmarks, and essentially guaranteeing the sale creates that comfort in the client's minds. And in my perspective, it sort of answers the question, how do we ensure that there is trust and faith in the system? We spoke about fintech and proptech coming together, which is, of course, a crazy thing. I believe if you had met us in 2015, everybody would say so. Today, not so much. We spoke about everybody's predictions for the next 5 years. And Vivek, if we talk about your part, which is ownership becoming on demand, I would love to see that. I would love to see how we get from where we are today to the very next step. It's been a fantastic discussion. Thank you to the audience for answering the poll questions. Thank you for your insights. Thank you to Vivek, Ashu, Akhil, and Raja for your time. I'm going to